for the YouTube to go on, so I know it's on. Okay, the YouTube is on. All right. So, a couple things in very quick before I. On your own. I put on Teams. I hope all of you saw the quiz from chapter 3 on there. For some reason, it didn't record a score, so I had to go back and do it by hand. So I'm getting the grades. I mean, you guys know how many you got right or wrong. It just didn't give me a score, so I had to go do it by hand. It's not a big deal. It's just a pain. For me, I know you feel my pain, don't you? I can see the empathy in your eyes. Okay, so I'll get that back. I put a couple more things on Team. So let me make sure that, I mean, Teams is quirky. I'm not a fan, but we're kind of stuck with it. So I started doing this last week, and I don't know why I didn't do this in the beginning, but I will put down what we're doing every day, just real quick. So even if you're not there, you have an idea. So a little bit of the Colonial Economy. I didn't quite get to the fur trade, but you know, I always have plans. But you have to join your AP section. And you can do this, we can either do it right now, I'll give you a couple minutes, we'll do it right now. If you've already signed up or been on AP before, if you haven't, you have to sign up and then go through the process to create a username. And so, but you have to sign up on my class, or sign up in my section, and this is the PDF that will have all the information on how to do it. And then these are the codes. So for third period, this is the code you have to put in to be in my section. Yes?
Does it show you if we're in your class? Because I think I did it, but I don't know if it's in your class, you know?
You have to, I can go back and look at it, but did you type in this code and did that?
Yeah.
You should be in there.
Okay.
And I was going to wait a few days and then go back and I can access it and see who has it.
Okay.
So once you're in there, if you log on, it should put down your classes you're in. And then I'll get a full list. And just get this done as soon as you can. This is the, they do it by phone, but it's my app, collegeboard.org. If you have to, if you don't have an account, you got to make your account, and that'll take a little bit more time. It's easy. But then click the yellow, join the course, submit the code, you're in. It should be really easy. But we have to do this in case you take the AP exam. Or if I put anything on this webpage, it's already confusing enough to go through everything. And I know that some teachers use like 5 or 6 different things to post you assignments, which I think is fun for you. But hey, you know, it's whatever that. It's tough to set all this up, so whatever works for them. But in case there's anything like there's practice tests and things on that, on this, and if we get near the exam, last year I just told them where to access it, and since they're already in, they quick did it, and it helped a lot. Just for practice. I don't do any actual assignments out of this, but when we do the exam, you need to be on there. And if you're not on, if you don't have a username, go ahead and do it on your own. And then let's go ahead then and I just started mercantilism in the class on Friday. So just go take your notes out. I got to finish mercantilism. Just make sure I'm recording. I'm going to do my screen check. You should get things out. Whew. I'm sorry, it is smoky. It's noticeably worse in just 30, 40 minutes. Has anyone seen the pictures from Portland or Seattle or San Francisco? Anyone see pictures of that? It looks like the apocalypse. It's terrifying. And I wish I could say this is an aberration, but it's the new normal. I'm just going on YouTube on my phone to make sure I'm broadcasting. I finally got a cord. And it's literally charging at this moment for the laptop. That will be my monitor. Good story, huh? Anyhow. Oh, we're going. Exciting? What other things I got in here? It wants me to watch U.S. election night coverage in 1980. YouTube suggested for me. And the best bass lines for the Beatles. Okay, so I wonder what I've been looking at. And maybe put those two things on here. So we got to mercantilism, and one of the big things is when we do the exam's going to be about, well, we get done with the Revolutionary War. That'll be the first real exam, not a little quiz. And, sorry, trying to find this. So, on this, you have to write a little bit. There'll be some multiple choice, but also writing. And there will be something on racism, something on Bacon's Rebellion that you have to write about. Because the development of racism, in fact, the concept of race came out of Bacon's Rebellion. And it had so much to do with the formation of the United States. So I really want to make sure that you concentrate on that. And race, remember, racism is not just simply, what a weird way to put it, but prejudice. It's not thinking, well, I'm better than somebody else because I have plaid skin or something. No, it's not that. Racism is using laws, economics, cultural norms to put one race over the other. And almost always in this context, white supremacy. And don't forget, it's not the idea then that all whites will be higher. It's so who will be on top. Yeah. The people who are already on top will remain on top. That's the big thing about racism. So while everyone else is fighting amongst themselves, they're on top. And that was the plan. That's why they set up the slave codes. That's why the most important of all of those numbers would be or of all the slave codes would be the fornication laws. Are you just finishing putting that in?
Yeah.
Yeah, finish it up at another time. I know. You have to make an account.
Yeah.
Purple Rain? Yeah. I saw that in the theater. Only 34 years ago. Okay, so with that, but do not forget that idea. And this is such a big deal. We're going to come back to this Bacon's Rebellion thinking. Time after time. You know, the Confederates, during the Civil War, poor whites didn't have much, but they had that one thing. They're white and they want to maintain their position because that's all they got. And it's pernicious. It just gets into everything. And it's actually, the rage is pretty amazing. So we got to mercantilism. Didn't we stop like right here? Does that look right to everybody from Friday? By the way, YouTube work okay for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, isn't it? I mean, that's the best way to go. And the whole thing about mercantilism, this economic policy that everybody would follow, even though this is really going to be I'm being driven to distraction every time I look at the smoke. It's anybody have practice tonight outside? Oh, yeah. Take a run outside? Okay. So there's only a finite amount of gold, and we produce as much gold, or we get as much gold as possible, therefore we will win. This idea that it's a zero-sum game, there's only so much gold. How do you do it then? Maximize out exports. No imports. Exports, so gold is coming from other countries. So Britain wants France to buy from them, or vice versa. And a tariff is a tax on imports. Another name for a tax is a duty. And it raises the price of imports then. Because the tax is passed on to the consumers. The consumers don't want to pay the tax, so they'll buy local goods. In fact, there'll be a term for this, protectionism, because it protects your manufacturing or your farmers. And we'll come back to the concept of protection a little bit later on. So we'll first really hit it with Alexander Hamilton. But here's the issue with it. What about the competitors? If Britain starts this or France starts this, what's Austria doing? What's Spain doing? Aren't they trying to get the same thing? Aren't they trying to accumulate as much gold as possible? And you get a tariff war. A tariff war, where everyone starts raising tariffs. Now this actually cuts back on trade, cuts back on manufacturing. This could be really damaging for the economy. But to their point of view, we're going to drive our competitors out of business. There have been tariff wars all through the 19th century. Big tariff war right in the beginning of the Great Depression, which was a catastrophe. Right now we're in a trade war. Using various laws, national defense laws, President Trump has raised tariff on goods from all over the world, but especially China. And so the United States is with a trade war now, a tariff war with China, with Canada, with Mexico, and it's not going well for American manufacturing right now. Actually, it's dropping, but even before COVID hit. And so that's where we're in right now. But anyways, manufactured goods are the most valuable item. I mean, sure, agricultural goods might be valuable, but think about taking a big mound of iron and turning that into pots or weapons, or going into the 19th century, ships, etc., etc. And this is the beginning of capitalism. Proto means beginning or roots. The beginning of capitalism. And I need a drink. I'm trying to talk without my paper mask because I just hate breathing in the paper. But these masks move along. Capitalism would be created with the Industrial Revolution. So it's pre-capitalism. Capital, the most basic thing is that's the machines. The machines that do the work. Proto-capitalism is they're just starting to buy things that do the work or find something else, like humans, that they'll own. But it's not quite what the economy, kind of what we have today. So we'll talk more about capitalism. So here's the thing. Britain does not have all these raw materials. In fact, right at that moment, they're basically out of trees. All across Britain, they'd cut down almost all the trees by the 16th or the 17th century. If you go to Britain today, and they have these beautiful forests, thick, heavy forests, but they look kind of odd. They'll be in the middle of the field, there'll be a big group of trees, and then surrounded by fields. It's because they've all been planted time after time after time. You walk through them, and every tree is the exact same distance apart. It's kind of eerie. Why'd they cut down all their trees? Actually, shipping was important, but even the smaller trees that cut down, they usually need really big.
Paper.
Good guess, but using a lot of paper for that. That's actually a really good guess. Glass. They're using it for the fire to make glass, for the kilns. What do you make glass out of? You. Yeah. You go home, make sand, get a big palace in, superheat it. Yeah. Glass became a craze. Having windows became like the biggest, most important thing you could have. That really big sign of wealth. Seems kind of weird today, but glass window. And they cut down all the trees. So then, if you're an island, you need ships, and also you cut down the trees, then your shipping really hurts, all that. So they needed these things. In fact, they went on a buying spree in the 17th century, buying up big hunks of Norway, what is now Norway, for trees. So anyways, colonies provide the raw materials. And that's imperialism. Colonies. If we get the colonies, here's a very quirky little cartoon, hee, mother country. They get the raw goods and return manufactured goods. It's not that cartoon. But colonies do three things. Number one, three things about colonies. They provide the raw materials. So you don't have to pay a tariff. If you have to buy from another country, tariffs, exports, your money leaves. If you get the colonies, then you own the source, you as a country. And then how do you make money? A tax. You add an additional tax to the sale of all the goods from the colonies. This additional tax is called an excise tax. So just a percentage, boom, you pay extra. I should add that we have taxes like that here. Whenever you buy a gallon of gasoline, you pay $1 in tax. It just added to the cost, added to the price. Stay in a hotel, you pay a tax. Use a phone, you pay a tax. You just don't see it, it's just part of your bill. And that's called an excise tax. The most famous kind of excise tax is a sales tax. Montana has a limited sales tax on a few things I could just mention, but Montana does not have a sales tax for all items. We're one of 3 states. What's that?
Oregon is another one too.
Yeah, and Vermont. We'll talk more about a sales tax a little bit later on. It's a way to tax poor people and not tax rich people. Gee, I wonder who made those laws, huh? But we don't have. Next, they make sure that they can't trade with their competitors. They don't want New England. They don't want Massachusetts to send their plants. From their logging, you cut, their trees were incredibly wide, the great diameter, great planks for shipping. They want to make sure they traded them only with England. So they would try to curtail trade, or for that matter, even tobacco. They don't want the tobacco to go to France. Britain wants to get their cut. And then, number 2, they provide a captive market. Then you turn around and force them to buy only from some other country. No colonial manufacturing. Don't let them buy from other countries. So the colonies can only trade with the mother country. And so, think about what this does to prices. I would have put like a little mark here for both these. If the colonies can only sell to Britain, what happens to the price of their raw materials, whether it be logging or iron or tobacco? If they can only sell to in the British market, what happens to the price? Drops. It drops. Because let's say France and Spain could buy it too. They'd go into a bidding war and bid the price up.
There's less demand.
Yeah, there's net less demand. And even if there was a lot of demand in Britain, they can only sell to Britain, so that drives the price down. Very good. What happens to the price of manufactured goods if they can only buy from Britain? It goes up. And so, they don't get as much money for the raw materials and have to pay more for manufactured goods. So this hits the colonies both, I was going to say coming and going, but yeah. Imports coming in, exports coming out. They pay more, don't make as much money. All this is to suck every penny out of the colonies. Suck it all out. And there's already a shortage of money in the colonies. So you can imagine, by the way, the colonists know this is happening. They know that's the plan. And they're furious about it. But this is the system. And what would the colonies do if they had the power to say, to stop this? What would they do?
They just stop trading.
Yeah. Or at least trade to somebody else. Yeah. That's why 3. No colonial self-government. Make sure they can't govern themselves. You remember I mentioned the House of Burgesses? That was technically violating the law. They didn't want colonial government. They want, if you're an imperial country, you want dictatorships. By the way, every imperial country would say, we're here to bring freedom and civilization. But what do they all do? Set up dictatorships. They want to control, because if the colonies had governments, first thing they would do, end this. They want to make sure that they maintain power. And so, the mother country will always be in charge. So, there's all kinds of different forms of slavery and tyranny, and this is tyranny. By definition. So, here's the old mercantile poster. Everyone okay? The mother country in gold and silver, and suck everything out. By the way, we live in Montana. Did you know that? Montana is very much like a colony. You notice there's not a lot of manufacturing, and what happened to all the wealth in the state? What? Have you been to Butte? What happened to Butte? I mean, that's what happened, isn't it? They sucked the wealth out, and what's left in Butte now? Ruined, isn't it? It's just ruined. Montana's like this. Heck, Butte used to have 120,000 people in 1919. Hard to imagine now. What is that, 25,000? Half of it's a ghost town. They came in, took the wealth. The wealth's not here. Montana's not a rich state. Montana's a poor state. Relative. I mean relative. We might be better off in some ways than a lot of other states, but that's for different reasons, certainly not for wealth. And so with that, here's Britain. They are setting up this empire. Here, okay, ice and fur trade, but we have New Spain, New France, Brazil. But Russia has a massive empire. Austria was a big empire. The Ottoman Empire was huge. There's African empires still. Denmark and Norway is an empire. They're all doing it in different ways, sometimes in Europe, sometimes overseas, and that's the same idea. Go on, take an area, and suck out the wealth and leave. Why do you think Africa's poor? Because Europeans came in, took everything, and then left. I mean, they're still there, but they left ruined. And it's hard to govern ruin, especially with arbitrarily weird borders. I should add, Amerigo's Vespucci was following Vasco da Gama, or not Vasco da Gama, yeah, Vasco da Gama. The Gama found a way to get around Africa. The currents were so hard here they couldn't go along the course, so he just rolled the die. They sailed out in the middle of nowhere, found the winds, and slingshotted around. It's actually pretty cool. So Vespucci was following him 50 or 40 years later. And he starts to go this way and runs into Brazil. That's up in Portugal. He was sailing for Portugal, and that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese. And they made a map of his discoveries called Amerigo's map. America. Kind of surprising he didn't become Columbia, but that's the way it goes. So, British imperial policy, the why's supposed to be there. So Britain's going to carry out mercantilism. Britain didn't do these colonies for any other reason except for profit. So, a couple things about this. First off, 1650s, three major laws. First one in 1651, that we lump together as the Trade and Navigation Acts, or sometimes simply the Navigation Acts. And this was actually done when Britain was a republic in the Commonwealth. But then as soon as the king came back, they kept doing this. And what were they? A list of commodities, aka enumerated commodities. They listed out valuable commodities like tobacco and put a tax on it. What's another name for a tax? A duty. And so all these commodities from like sugar from the Caribbean, or tobacco or wood products from the American colonies. I'm just using it as the United States, but the North American colonies. Put a tax on it. And a commodity is anything you sell. You can grow it, mine it, build it, it's a commodity. And so anything from iron to grain to frozen concentrated orange juice are all commodities. Today, gold is a commodity. Gold is not money, gold is a commodity. They buy and sell just like any other product. And so the price and the value of gold fluctuates. It always has fluctuated, but what's American money based on? Now, these current value of the United States, what backs it up? It's just there. It just happens. By the way, I should add, if it just happens and most people have no idea how stuff like that happens, doesn't that give the people who know how it happens a lot of power? Couldn't they manipulate and control people? I mean, that would never happen, would it? Let me rephrase that. That would happen all the time. What did you say?
That's funny.
What did you say about gold? What backs it up? Money. What?
Commodities.
Good guess, but no, not even that. The U.S. always pays its debt and always collects taxes. And as long as it does that, people believe that the United States is worth what it earned. The United States word is worth something, aka a dollar or money. People believe the U.S. will pay off its debts and collect taxes. If the U.S. becomes unstable and cannot pay its taxes, if the U.S. they realize might be a bad risk, the value of the dollar collapses. Money is based upon trust. So what backs money? Imagination. We all want to believe it's worth something, right? So it's worth something. If we all of a sudden don't believe it's worth something, what is it worth? Which kind of makes it kind of scary when you think about it. But whatever, right? We'll come back to money. So, also, every good shipped out of the colony has to be on, okay, the law was written as English ship, so I put down English. But when Great Britain would come about, on a British ship. So, has to be on the ship. Therefore, they collect the tax. Has to be through a port, so it collects the tax. And therefore, it keeps the price down. Britain will not have to pay as much for commodities because they are controlling the trade. AKA, they have a monopoly. They have monopoly of who buys and who sells. A monopoly. And we'll come back to monopolies. The fear of monopolies would be overriding, which is so ironic because now our country is dominated by monopolies who run everything. And monopolies keep prices down, they keep wages for workers down, they keep quality down. Wow. Let me whine more about teams. Monopoly, Microsoft. They operate like a monopoly. We're coming to a lot of these things. It directly relates to here. But, anybody know what deja vu is?
Something's happened. Like the feeling that you've experienced something already that you probably haven't.
Yeah. This is going to be an example of deja vu through American history. These kind of things are going to happen time after time after time. In fact, the events leading up to the Revolutionary War, Britain is going to be trying to get back to the Navigation Acts over and over again. And we'll see these things where something will happen, and then it'll happen again, and then something like it will happen again, and then something like it will happen again. And all of you will be thinking, I hope, wait a minute, why didn't we learn from that? And then, of course, you'll come up with the very scary realization that we never learn from anything. And we should. That's part of the reason why they make us teach this class. You're supposed to understand it, and then it just happens again and again. Wait till I tell you about boom economies and bubbles. You just won't believe it. Time after time. The economy gets too big, prices overvalue, they believe, and it'll eventually crash and bring down the entire world's economy. It's only happened a dozen or so times. And every time people think it won't happen again. Not this time, we're all going to get rich, and then it collapses. Happened in your lifetime, 2007, 2008. Remember those heady days? What were you, 3?
5.
2 or 3? 5?
5, 7, 3.
What year were you born? 2003 or 2004?
4.
3.
3 or 4, wow.
So that's 3.
Did you guys lose your investments?
Yeah, it was really sad.
It was,
Saved
yeah.
up for a car.
That's one thing about living in Montana. It was bad here, but we live in Montana. So the good times happen and we're still in Montana. The bad times happen, okay, at least we're in Montana. All right. Then they tried to limit production of goods. They passed laws over the next 60 years saying the colonies could not produce hats. They could not produce iron goods. They could not produce woolen linens. To make sure that they have to buy from Britain. If you remember Gandhi, I don't know if some of you probably watched the movie World Cultures, but Gandhi wore, he made his own clothes, the homespun. Why? So he wouldn't buy British goods. Because Britain was doing this to India. Ironically, most of the linens that would become popular to this day would be from India. And then India would ban their production. Or it's not India, I'm sorry. Britain would ban their production so they could make money. The most famous, pretty soon, when it gets a little bit warmer, we got a few, but denim, India. But the same thing was happening to the 13 colonies, or at least the British tribe. But probably the one that had the biggest impact, especially because it happened in Boston, was the Molasses Act. The Molasses Act was part of this massive trade with the French East Indies. Beans and things like that from Boston would go down to the French East Indies, or the French West Indies, these countries right here, and they would trade and then bring back molasses. But they wouldn't just trade other, what would they make from the molasses? Do you know what molasses is?
It's like a syrup.
Yeah. Yeah, sticky stuff. But you're right. It's kind of refined sugar. It's kind of a brown, sugary liquid, kind of a syrup. And yes, it's really sticky. What do you make out of it? Yeah, cookies. The big cookie production. Yeah, I like molasses cookies. I'm going to admit right now, I like them. But the big thing you make out of it is rum. And rum was a big value-added product. People drank. Well, because people drank about 10 times more alcohol then than today.
People drink a lot today.
Yeah, it's different. Today it's kind of a binge, which is probably less healthy than what they did then, which is just kind of drink all the time.
Oh.
Let's be clear. It's probably bad. It's a drug, so it's probably bad for you both ways. But the rum then was kind of this thick, heavy, syrupy stuff, and they put like butter into it or lard. Lard. You know what lard is?
Yeah.
And just animal fat. We're humans. We like animal fat.
That sounds terrible.
It does sound horrible, but that's what humans crave.
People like things that are bad.
Why do humans crave animal fat? Energy. Humans were hunters. Like when I was a kid. How did we eat? We'd run down our prey. So we need lots of energy. No, it's true. Why do you think we sweat? All those things come, but now we don't quite run down our prey as much as we used to. Does anyone still run down their prey?
I'm just caught up on the fact that you said you did when you were a child.
Yeah, I'm from a different generation.
I see.
In my day, yeah, there's a gazelle, and we just take off. But they get tired. Well, here's the thing. They would eat, and that'd be like a meal. I mean, kids, the whole family, you would eat this rum thing. But, which really sounds weird, that's big money. And what are the British saying? You can't make money. Where did the revolution start? Boston. It's no coincidence. But they passed all these laws, but something was called, and this was done by American U.S. historians in the 19th, like after the Civil War. They called it salutary neglect. And salutary means good, implying this was good for somebody. Now they're thinking good for what's going to become the United States, but actually, mercantilism doesn't work.
Wow.
And because the colonies ignored it, British merchants actually did better without the restrictions. The colonists just didn't obey the Navigation Acts. Technically, they're all a bunch of smugglers. In fact, the most famous smuggler in U.S. history would get rich off it. And the reason he's the most famous is because of his money. He would be the head of the Second Continental Congress, called the President. And he'd be the first person to sign something called the Declaration of Independence. Have you ever heard of John Hancock? And I'll show you that a little bit later, but John Hancock was a smuggler. Because they were just avoiding the Navigation Acts. And Britain would keep trying to enforce this. There are 3 reasons why. First one, it's obvious. Distance. Think about it. 1700. How would you enforce something from London to the New World? Secondly, the colonists went there, as they saw, for their liberty, aka economic opportunity. They're like, how dare you make us slaves? Just a sec. I gotta see something. Huh. Weird pictures of me walking right into the camera. Make us slaves? Well, we came here for our liberty. Liberty's complex. It's more than freedom. So, yeah, make your laws, but go to hell. We're in the US and you're in London. And they kept saying that over and over again. And lastly, where's my thing? Imperial wars. Britain was at war with France. They're at war with Spain. They're at war with the Netherlands.
They couldn't be bothered to.
Yeah, stretch too thin.
Yeah, you're about right. Yeah, stretched too thin. And they also didn't want to make enemies of the colonists. They needed them in case they had a French invasion. And so they just ignored them. I got time choosing them. So Salutary Neglect, they would form unique colonies, bitter bickering, and also political systems. Every colony would follow the House of Burgesses, and they would make their own colonial assembly. Britain didn't want them to make laws. They didn't want them to feel independent that way, but they did. All of this is leading to the American Revolution. By the way, the US would do imperialism and mercantilism too. Click, click. But the thing was, the colonies were vastly different. I mean, this map did not turn out as well as I thought. It's really kind of blurry. But, you know, if you look at one of these maps, what's the difference? But this area called the Piedmont, flat, broad, different kind of agricultural land than here, where the mountains run right to the ocean. They're relatively low mountains from our point of view, but a mountain's a mountain. Might have fertile land, but limited, or it's limited for the size of the farms because of the mountains. So you just got different kind of agriculture. Weather is different. In fact, in the most basic sense, the New England and Middle Atlantic, mountains, hilly, rocky, really rocky soil. Has anyone ever picked up rocks in a farm? One of the most awful job there is. Clearing rocks from a field. I got a job for you. Who likes the back? Okay. They have fast-moving rivers. Significantly different. And we have, these are basic things you all know, but there's going to be smaller farms. Smaller farms mean more farms, meaning more landholders, meaning more people can take advantage of the land here. You notice I use the word take advantage because they're stealing it from somebody. Much more diversified. Where in the South, the Chesapeake and the Lower South, the AKA Slave Kingdom, and that's the only reason British settlers came here, to start plantations. The Piedmont, good soil, slow waterways, which is good for navigation too, to move crops up and down the field, but also means big farms, longer growing season, different type of agriculture. You're going to have different people living here than here. And that legacy exists to this day. It really is noticeable. You're going to be inundated with maps showing, excuse me, we'll talk about what's what, but what state votes for whom? We'll be inundated with these electoral maps for the presidential election. And the legacy of that political divide, of the political divide today, goes back to here. We can't escape it. By the way, Montana's, we kind of come from this Appalachian area. That's our roots. And a little bit of New England, but mostly Appalachian. Farmers fleeing Scotland who didn't like when to be independent. So, let's get into the different colonial economies. We're going to make a little column, north and south. And the thing about the north, there are more businesses, aka that's mercantile. There's more trade, which is, excuse me, God, sorry, I got this little cough, sex, and accelerated by this smoke. There are hardly any towns, almost everyone's rural, but it's more urban when the bell rings. And that's an important development. Okay, I'm going to put another little reading up. I'm going to sound a little bit left of chapter 3, but I'll put that up tomorrow. Everyone got the quiz in? I'll go back and I'll grade it. Don't worry, I'll get them out as soon as I can. After school, I will put down, sorry. After school, I'll get down all your grades in the book. I will see you